So, Duncan, for the last few weeks, we've been exploring this whole issue of the emotions that compete for control and how can we say no to those emotions. So, we've looked at anger, we've looked at envy, we've looked at guilt, we've looked at fear, we've looked at a whole bunch of stuff. And the thing is, everyone's got a different emotion that's battling for control in them. And whilst those emotions might change, how we deal with them must be the same. What advice would you give to me? What's the one thing that I could do to say no to whatever that emotion is that's competing for control?
It's a great question, and there are probably 10 things. But what jumps to mind straight away, the one thing I think that'll help us to put our head above water in these things has got something to do with friendship. I've heard it said so many times, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. You know, if you can't expect to walk right in life and overcome these fears and overcome these emotions that want to take control of us. You can't expect to walk right in life if you've got the wrong friends or if you've got no friends at all. So there's this brilliant story in the Bible Jesus tells. You read it in Luke's Gospel. It's fantastic, the story about the paralysed man. There's this guy who spends the entirety of his life on this little mat that's no more than kind of 5 foot long and 3 foot wide. That's his life. His legs don't work. And he's got nothing to offer anybody. You know, he needs someone else to come and, you know, wipe him up, clean him up when he soiled himself. He needs someone else to dress him, someone else to wash him, someone else to bring food to him. And that's all he's got. There's no rehab centres, there's no medical centres, there's no kind of NHS he can go and get help from. He has nothing to offer anybody except for one thing. He has friends. He has incredible friends. You see, these friends had heard that Jesus was in town. And every time Jesus taught, he always drew a crowd, not only because his teaching was amazing, but he backed up everything he said with miracles. And people wanted to see these miracles. They'd never seen anything like it. So a guy lends Jesus his house, and a crowd gather and pack this house to listen to Jesus teach and possibly see some miracles. And these friends get wind of the fact that Jesus is in town. So they go to this paralysed guy, they pick him and his mat up, and they bring him to Jesus. But the disappointment that must have been on their faces when they arrived, because people were hanging out of doors and windows. There was no way they were going to get this paralysed man to Jesus. Except one guy's got a great idea. One of the friends, like a light bulb goes on in his head. He says, guys, follow me. And they walk up the steps outside of the house and onto the roof. And houses back in those days, they had these roofs, they had these whole houses that were built out of, I think these days we call it daub and wattle. It's kind of like straw and mud that's welded together around beams. And so on these flat roofed houses, people would dry their clothes or sit out in the sunshine or whatever it might be. So these friends bring this man up the stairs onto the roof and they start ripping lumps of this straw and mud away. And you can imagine the distraction levels in the room as Jesus is teaching. I mean, I've taught before and people have thrown food at me when I've been out on the streets doing stuff. People have walked out of messages when I've talked, probably because they're bored or fed up or angry or whatever. But no one's ever come through the roof when I've been speaking. So the distraction levels would have been high. And you know, Chris, as a speaker, when you know the crowd aren't with you, it's disturbing, isn't it? You know. And so Jesus is teaching, and I'm presuming he would have just gone quiet because everybody's looking up. And there's light coming through the roof into this dark room. And it would have, you know, there would have been dust particles flying around in these beams of sunlight. And all they can see when they look up is these hands pulling more and more of the roof away and the hole getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And everybody's looking up. And so they lower this guy down on ropes in front of Jesus. I mean, it's genius. Hollywood should have done a movie about it. That should be the next Disney film. You can imagine the scene, can't you? And they drop him down in front of Jesus. And I love Jesus' reaction because he doesn't go, security, problem here, get this man out of here. He looks at the guy. You know what he says I think it's Luke chapter 5. You know what he says? He looks at the guy, he looks at the friends, and he says to the friends, not to the guy, he says to the friends, because of your faith, because of the friends of the faith of the friends, I'm going to do something great for the guy on the mat. So because of their faith, he says to this guy on the mat, it's interesting this, he says to the guy on the mat, not your legs are now going to work. He does that in a minute. The first thing he says to him is, because of the faith of your friends, your sins are forgiven. And I love that idea. I love this idea that because of their faith, Jesus gives this man the ability before anything else to walk right with his Heavenly Father. I mean, in a minute, he gives him the ability to put one foot in front of the other, because Jesus knows the greatest miracle that happened in that moment wasn't that he could put one foot in front of the other. It's that Jesus gave him the ability to walk free for eternity, not just for the rest of his life, but for eternity. But the big issue for me, the big moment here is that if you've got these things that are wrestling to control you, these emotions that are grabbing hold of you, if you've got these struggles in life and you don't know where to go, it's friendship that's going to get you there. It's friendship that's going to keep you going. And so when COVID hit and we all struggled and the emotions ran riot in our lives, for those of us that had great friendships, for those of us who were part of small groups, who gathered together for others, there were obvious phone calls that we could make. There were obvious Zoom connections we could make. And now the restrictions have reduced a little. There are obvious times we can go and meet people in Costa for a coffee or something like that. But for others of us who've shunned friendship, who've pushed friendship away and thought small groups are a waste of time, now when the storm has hit, it's been tough because we don't know where to turn.
So there's something about having a group of people around us who are willing, just like the friends in that example, who are willing to carry us to Jesus. And I wonder, there's, you know, it's obvious what this guy's problem was. It's obvious what his issue was. He couldn't walk. He was paralysed. But I wonder if there's something there about how willing are we to be open and honest with that group of friends to actually say, well, you know what, my issue isn't that I can't walk, but my issue is my anger is holding me back, or my envy, or my lust, or my fear, or whatever it is, and that we have to be open and honest with a bunch of friends who are able to come to us and pick us up and simply carry us to Jesus. You know, do we have those friends? Who are those friends?
And wouldn't it be amazing, Chris? You're absolutely right. Wouldn't it be amazing? Now, we're friends. We've got a great friendship. Wouldn't it be amazing if, when you and I were interacting, if your passion was to point me to Jesus? Yeah. Like these friends, their passion was to get their friends in front of Jesus. What if that was your driving force in our relationship? I want to do all I can to point Duncan towards Jesus and point Jesus towards Duncan. How would that change our friendship? It would be incredible, wouldn't it? And Jesus saw that in these friends, and it made a massive difference in this paralysed man's life. He was paralysed physically, but sometimes it's fear that paralyses us, or lust, or anger, or guilt that paralyses us. And maybe, just maybe, it's the kind of company we keep. Because how on earth can we expect to walk right when we've got the wrong friends, or we've got no friends at all? I think this guy was right. You know, when he said, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yeah. And there's something about community helping us through difficulties, that actually when there is somebody experiencing what we're experiencing or standing with us in that, we're able to cope, we're able to face a lot better. You've shared a story, I think, that Henry Cloud has talked about with monkeys. Say something about that.
Dr. Henry Cloud is a world-renowned psychologist. His books are fantastic. If you ever get to pick up a Dr. Henry Cloud book, they're easy to read, they're brilliant books. And he tells a great story about psychologists that did an experiment about the stress levels on monkeys and how to reduce them. And so they took a monkey, and it sounds a bit cruel this, but it's fantastic. They took a monkey, they put him in a cage, and they wired him up to sort of monitor his stress levels. They put him in a cage, they shone bright lights into the cage, they put loud noises into the cage, and they rattled the cage. They shut the door and rattled the cage. And of course, as they were monitoring stress levels, they went through the roof. Now, what they did next was great. They didn't turn any of the noise off, they didn't stop rattling the cage, they didn't turn the lights out, they didn't make it any more difficult or easy for the monkey. They just opened the cage door and they put another monkey in and shut the door again. Nothing changed, except there were now two monkeys in the cage. When they monitored the monkey's stress levels, his stress levels reduced by 50%. Nothing changed, apart from the fact he had another monkey to go through that with him. So I'm just asking you, Chris, who's your monkey? You know, who do you call when your cage gets rattled? Maybe the way to overcome some of the stresses that these emotions put on our lives is that we've got someone to walk through them with, someone to stand alongside us. When your cage gets rattled, who's the monkey that steps in alongside you? If you don't know who that is, if you don't know who to call at 3 o'clock in the morning when life kicks in, if you don't have a monkey to stand next to you when life gets rattly, then I think you're never going to overcome those emotions that want to get the best of you.
Yeah, that's a great question for us to think about. You know, when we're in those difficult situations, who is our monkey, and who are we willing to be a monkey for as well? Who are the people that, in our lives that we're willing to go and stand in their cage with them as they go through those experiences. Well, thanks for helping us unpack that and share that a little bit deeper.